Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Walmsley. Welcome to today's webinar with Tracey Barrett. Tracey, I'm delighted to have you here with me today. Obviously, you and I go back many years through to the Parker Bridge days. So when I ran Parker Bridge, a recruitment company in London, and then ultimately Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, Wellington, and Dublin, Tracey was one of the key drivers, in fact, was the key driver of the PR and marketing strategy in that business. And I saw the massive impact that she had at the time, really. And if anyone thinks that PR and marketing is fluffy, Tracey would prove you wrong, because for the first time back then, I came across somebody who was commercial and actually had worked in recruitment as a recruiter and understood the market. So pleasure to have you here. Obviously nowadays, Tracey, you're running BlueSky PR and have been spectacularly successful in that. But I'd like perhaps you know more about your business than I do. Perhaps you can give a quick introduction and follow on from me, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. And thanks, Mike, for inviting me on this webinar. So yeah, I'm Tracey Barrett. I'm Managing Director of BlueSky PR, and we're a specialist marcoms consultancy specifically for the recruitment sector. The reason being that myself and my co-MD, who's that rather Father Christmas looking man with the beard, are ex-recruiters ourselves, way back when there was no technology at all, so when it was really difficult. And we do three things really, I suppose. We undertake media relations campaigns on behalf of recruitment clients, getting them quoted in the press, talking about what they can sensibly be talking about. We create great content for things like blogs, ebooks, newsletters, websites, white papers, all that sort of thing. And we devise and execute and support social media strategies to make sure that all that great content gets out to as wide an audience as possible. So in a nutshell, Mike, that's what we do.
Right, well, thank you for that. I thought a really good way to delve into your expertise today, Tracey, which I, of course, know firsthand, is to put questions to you from recruiters. So if we could start with the first one, which is, why do agencies need a strategy to differentiate themselves?
Okay, well, I think the first thing to say is there is so much noise out there. You know, there are, I think the last count at Companies House was something like 40,000 recruitment agencies in the UK. And what's interesting about that is 9,000 of those were formed in the last year alone, which is quite a startling statistic, and 84% of those were formed in the last decade. So it's a really mushrooming sector, and there's a lot of noise out there. You've got a lot of competition, there's no barrier to entry, and so you need to differentiate yourselves from that other 40,000. But I think more important than that, you've got much more competition in terms of, if you think about in-house recruiters, the in-house recruitment profession has again mushroomed in the last 10 years, and they've got access to some great technology, some expensive technology that gives them access to talent pools and talent pipelines. And I think also candidates are far more discerning. They know their value. When I was a recruiter, you know, back in the 1980s, they were grateful for you to place them in a job. I think these days they know exactly what their value is, and they know that sometimes they can be viewed as a bit of a commodity. So I think, you know, from that point of view, taking those three things into account, in-house recruiters, candidates more discerning, more agencies, and obviously clients expecting more for less, there is a real need for you to stand out from the crowd.
No, thank you. And, you know, the other day I was looking at a recruitment company website, and they had a bad hire calculator on it, which is essentially content-driven marketing in the sense that the client, the employer, could calculate the hidden cost of recruitment based upon research done with 150 HR directors, which was commissioned by a major trade association. So it was evidential, you know, research, not just someone's opinion. It was very, very powerful. And you think even at that level, having some kind of differentiator on your website that not just gives away some ideas, but captures the customer's details. Yeah, which I'm sure you'll expand on, Tracey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think about this next question? Have recruitment companies ever really got a USP? Because they can easily be copied.
Um, well, I don't think they have. I've yet to find somebody that's got a true USP. I think, you know, no matter what little quirk or little value add that you're offering, somebody else is doing it. And the reason I don't believe that recruiters have got a USP is that recruitment is a process. But the value that you add to that process is what I believe can help differentiate you. So I think it's more accurate to talk about a UVP, a unique value proposition. What value are you adding to the process that's going to put you, you know, ahead of your competition? And I think you can add real value through effective content marketing, but it's important that that content is of interest, of value, and most of all relevant. So have people got a USP? I don't think so. And I think if any of you listening have got a USP listed on your website and it talks about we're a people-oriented business, or, you know, we treat our clients and candidates with respect, please get rid of it.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. I saw a speaker a few years ago, and she pointed out that there was 10 recruitment businesses in the room, all different kinds. And she said, do you realize you are weeing on your brand? And everyone looked at her slightly bemused. And then she said, look, I'll show you. And each website had, we do this, we do the other, we were established in such a time, we care about our candidates and clients. And it's quite interesting that, you know, the switch of language to be able to then proposition it in a way where the customer sees value in dealing with you. So very interesting. I think also, you know, perceived USPs. Don't you agree, Tracey? Perceived USPs. I mean, Romney Rose years ago when he ran Select had a series of differentiators, which anyone could come up with and copy, but they were all perceived differentiator because he was able to market it effectively to them.
Yeah, there's a good example of that. There's a company, an APSCo member that I've been dealing with recently who have actually come up with what I think is a really good value proposition in terms of, you know, they realised there were like something like 60,000 unfilled tech vacancies last year, coding vacancies. Those people just don't exist. So they just decided to find them and train them. So they train them and then they place them. I mean, it's dead simple, but it really differentiates them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've just partnered with a content provider. It's got 57,000 training items for candidates. You know, so these are Ruby on Rails courses, PHP developer courses, Prince 2 courses, and so on. And very, very similar. So, and that, of course, other companies can do this, but at the time, it's a perceived USP, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question. What sorts of content can recruiters be creating?
Okay, I think the key here, and it comes back to what you were talking about language in the last slide, is if you don't take anything else from this webinar, please write this down, is write about what you know and not what you do. Because everybody knows what you do. You know, you find great talent, great roles, but write about what you know. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But in terms of the sorts of content, there is lots of content. There are blogs, there's your website, there's, you know, you could be writing ebooks and white papers, you can be producing infographics, you can obviously be writing press releases and articles for the press, you can be looking at guest blogs, video is massive at the moment, you can be creating content that's visual, that you can push out through social media, you can be turning your presentations and webinars into reports, but the key is, as I said before, is relevance. So write about what you know and not what you do.
Thank you for that, Tracey. And by the way, if there are additional questions coming in, I'll alert you to those. So okay. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience now, you'll see a little chat capability on your control panel. So if you do have a question for Tracey or you'd like greater explanation of one of the points, please drop that into the chat room. So the next question is in regards to PR, where do you start and how do you start a strategy?
Okay, I think the first thing to say is that a lot of people think of PR as just about the press, and it's not just about the press. PR has evolved exponentially in the last 5 or 10 years. So you have to think about PR in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of how you communicate with all your stakeholders through all the different channels that you've got at your disposal, and not just the press. But in terms of starting, and it sounds obvious, but you've got to have some objectives. You know, you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. Is it more candidates? Is it more clients? Is it more great people to work for you? Is it, you know, candidate pools in specific locations? And then I think you need to look at doing some persona mapping. So, you know, for those of you who haven't come across that term, that's just looking at who is your typical target. So if it's a client, you know, who is that client? Where are they based? What do they read? What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? If it's a candidate, you know, what are they going to be looking for? What are their motivators? What's going to make them move job? And actually visualize them, you know, call them something, you know, call them, you know, Clive the client, or, you know, Harriet the HR person, or whatever it might be, and list all the things that you think are going to be of interest to them from a recruiter. And that's a really good place to start. And, you know, think about what they read, you know, and approach some of those publications to see if you can get some guest articles in there, and think about where they hang out. You know, are there LinkedIn groups? Are there Facebook groups? Are there communities that you can be seeding content into to actually get in front of them? So that's where I'd start. I know that's quite a lot of things to think about, but that's definitely where I'd start.
Very interesting. You know, with anything, start with the end in mind, isn't it? What's your plan, and how do you break that down, and then execute rather than just jump in? And you know, the PR, I think some people listening might be thinking, well, yeah, get my name in the press, or get my company in an article online somewhere. But to share with you some of the things that Tracey did for me, I remember when you got us in the Evening Standard, Tracey, in London, and we had a call out of the blue asking for me because it was my name in the article. Can you help us, please? I saw you in the Standard. We need 8 contractors, which, you know, so you do get some incidental returns like this in terms of ROI. And I know, Tracey, you're coming on to ROI later, but I thought it was worth sharing that point.
Yeah.
So notwithstanding what you've said so far, what should recruiters be writing about?
Okay, so again, I think, you know, what you know and not what you do. And actually, you know, recruiters know lots of stuff. They might not think they do. Quite often they'll say, oh, you know, we've been told to write a blog, we don't really know what to write about. But you know about, you know, things going up, things going down, you know about skill shortages, you know what's driving those skill shortages, you know about, you know, retention strategies, hiring trends, you know about talent pooling, talent pipelining, and generally the people agenda. That's what you need to be writing about. I see a lot of blogs that concentrate on a particular market sector and news about that market sector, and that's fine. But I think clients and candidates can get that elsewhere. You know, they can get it from their industry press. What they can't get is, you know, what's happening, you know, what's happening in their sector around the talent agenda. What is the impact of, you know, legislation, you know, skill shortages, you know, factories opening, factories closing down, you know, what's in the news agenda that you could be piggybacking. And people are interested in that. You know, people are interested in people. And journalists are certainly interested in that sort of stuff. If you look at the, there's an annual survey that comes out from PwC, I think Deloitte do one as well, on human capital trends. And their CEO survey, if you look at the sort of top things that are keeping CEOs awake at night, it's how are they going to, you know, recruit and retain the talent that they need to achieve their business objectives. And recruiters are in an absolutely fantastic position to be able to answer some of those questions. And that's what you should be writing about. Excellent.
And I remember some other things you did for us, Tracey. In the reception area at Parker Bridge, whilst people were waiting to be interviewed, the candidates, there was a little questionnaire which was, you know, picking their brains on something. So, you know, what would you see are the key market trends at the moment in your sector or something? Maybe not that particular question. And then that just creates surveys which you can then push out to the press. You know, a recent survey by XYZ recruiters showed that 57% of candidates believe X. So I know you were strong on this, Tracey. Is that something you still recommend, surveys and so on?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things I'll be talking about in a minute. And you can do that either through your database or just by having a little snapshot poll of the month on your website. It's dead easy to capture the data. Excellent.
So how can you find other angles that resonate with clients and candidates?
Okay, well, I think it's going to be an obvious thing, but a lot of recruiters don't think about it. So the first thing is look at what data you have in the business. You've got loads of data, so look at your CRM and how that CRM could be sliced and diced to give you information that's going to be of interest to your clients and candidates. So, trends, regional trends, salary trends, diversity, sort of gender trends, international trends, and all that sort of thing. And you could even create a little index that, comes out once a month or once a quarter that really begins to get some legs and that your clients and candidates begin to want to receive and expect to receive. So use your data and collect data. So we've just been talking about surveys. Survey your candidate and client database, or even just do a little snapshot poll where you phone 25 clients or candidates up. It's another reason to pick up the phone to them and just ask them a question. Great one at the moment is, what's on your wish list for the new government? As long as we get a new government. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few months, but that's a great reason to pick up the phone at the moment. And that's, that's interesting, it's topical, people will be interested in reading about that. Another great one, particularly if you're in the public sector, is freedom of information requests. So anybody can put in an FOI request to, find out, what agencies are local authorities using to fill their vacancies, or how many use locum doctors, or that sort of thing. And I've got a really good case study on that I'll share with you later. I think also a lot of recruiters do events with their clients or candidates. Again, turn that event into, the outputs of that could make a really nice white paper or a report. I think the video that Mike shared on LinkedIn was me talking about how I do a few round tables a year. I just do it over a lunch. I have perhaps 5 or 6 clients that I work with and 5 or 6 clients I'd like to work with. I, facilitate a discussion about something, I record it on my phone, and then I turn that into an ebook, which then sits on the website and can be downloaded, which then generates leads. And then newsjacking, have a look what's already in the press that you can piggyback. So every morning my team go through the newspapers, and by 10 o'clock in the morning, there's a whole load of stories that we think we can piggyback from a talent perspective. Whether that's, again, at the moment we're doing the wish list for the government. A good few years ago now, and a really good example was when Steve Jobs died, which I know sounds a bit crass, but if those of you who remember, the Apple share price took a complete tank because there was no succession plan in place. So we did a whole series of blogs and articles on the importance of succession planning, piggybacking Apple, and that got loads of coverage because it was a famous company. And then human interest stories, your consultants will all be sitting on really good stories, the temps that met on a contract and got married, or, the temp that got to their job on a boat when the floods happened. There'll be lots of human interest stories that your team will have to do a bit of a brainstorm perhaps once a week and just find out if there are any good stories that you can share that way. So loads of angles, I think. You just need to look for them.
I remember you talking to the consultants, Tracey, and saying what's going on in the market. And one that sticks in mind was somebody who was placing credit controllers, saying, "Oh, there's an upsurge in credit controllers," and yeah. The output of that was an article about, is a recession coming? Yeah. Why are people suddenly recruiting lots of credit controllers? Is that because there's more debt? So as you said, there's lots of things that can come out of the people who work for you.
Absolutely.
So the next question is where to start with the channels. So what channels should you use to push out content?
Okay, so I think if you think about a wheel, the cog in the wheel is the initial piece of content, and it might be, let's just say that's a piece of press coverage. So that piece of content is really just a start. So let's say you've got let's say you're a finance recruiter and you've got an article in Accountancy Age. So the first thing you could do is you can repurpose that into a blog for your website, with a link to that article. So you've got some credible links to a trade publication. That's great for your SEO. You can, obviously create a status update and, include that link on your LinkedIn company page and seed it into any relevant LinkedIn groups. Make sure you're tagging the publication, @ing the publication, because then the reach of that becomes exponentially wider. Obviously, you can tweet it and tag in the publication. You can talk about it on a video and post that through your social channels or put that on your website. You can take a photo of it and put it on Instagram and again, tag in the publication. You can talk about it and release a podcast. And above all, you can send it to your clients or talk about it with your clients, because that's really where you're going to you'll get all this reach, through all the other channels that you use, but your real bang for buck is going to come by using it to recycle into the business development process.
Brilliant. I love the way you just reusing the same content over and over again for multiple parties. And, if you look at things like senior candidate tracking, which all recruiters, in my opinion, should be doing, staying in touch with 5 or 6 key, high level candidates that they may not be able to place. And then thinking, well, what do I say to them? Well, if you've got some content to give to them in that conversation, a white paper, a salary survey, an update on something in the market, that's another way that you can reuse the content you've described.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you're going to come on to ROI next, and then also case studies. So looking forward to the case studies to give some substance behind some of the thinking you've given us today, Tracey. But, how do you measure ROI? Because lots of people think marketing and PR is a bit fluffy and maybe a discretionary spend. So what's your view on measuring the ROI?
I think as a starter for 10, you have to have a process, and that process has to come from the top. So for example, what I mean by that is I remember I did a round table with some heads of marketing, and their frustration was the sales teams will always think leads come from sales rather than marketing. That's the way they're hardwired. And also recruiters, in terms of telling you where that first touch point was for a candidate or client, are quite lazy because they just want to get on and either fill the job or place a candidate. So there has to be a process. So, if you get a consultant saying, oh, where did that job come from? Oh, well, they just phoned in out of the blue. Well, that just doesn't happen. There must be a reason why they phoned in. And I think it's really important to try and track that. I haven't got a silver bullet, but it has to come from the top. In terms of sort of metrics, I'd look at your outputs. So, the stuff that you're putting out there, particularly on social, is it getting shared? How often and by whom? And does that create a lead? Make sure all your consultants have, make sure you've got an employee advocacy program so that all your consultants are liking and sharing and commenting, particularly on LinkedIn, because again, that's going to extend the reach. And then you can see who's engaging, you can see who's looking at your consultants' LinkedIn profiles. So look at what's happening to your community sizes, look what's happening to your web traffic. So use Google Analytics to set goals. So if somebody's onto your website and you want them to download a white paper, how many people are actually doing that and where are they coming from? Gate your content. So what I mean by that, again, if you've got some valuable content, whether it's a survey or a white paper, don't just give it away for nothing. Collect the data from the people that are looking at it, just an email address and a name, GDPR compliant, of course. And use things like, there's a really good free tool called SEMrush, which is S for sugar, E-M for Martin, Rush, where you can have a look at the keywords that your competitors are ranking for, so you can make sure that your content has the right keywords in it. But again, the biggest measurement for me has to be recycling it into the business development effort, and that's where the case studies come in, really.
Great. I think, you may have touched on this, Tracey, but when you use a capture form of some kind, when the person downloads a white paper or something, really you can measure those leads quite easily, can't you? So you can see how many candidates or how many clients have downloaded whatever it is you're giving away for free. And, content-driven marketing is obviously big. If people want the content, some people, not all of course, but some will download it and give their details as a trade-off.
Yeah.
And that's really, really easy to measure. So I know we're moving on to case studies now, so I'm very much looking forward to this. So here's the first case study, the £1,000 article.
Yeah, so this was a piece that we did for Rethink Energy. So basically, the head of the division we were talking to was saying that he had quite a few process engineers on his books. He needed somewhere to place them. Process engineers, it's a bit of a dry, dusty role, although they are absolutely critical to the success of a project. And so we pitched this idea of the rise of the process engineer and how important they were to an oil and gas magazine. Got a brain dump from David, who was head of the division, and wrote the article, and we got it placed. What he then did with that was, yes, of course, he put it into reception, and he probably showed his mum. But what he also did is he sent it out to 25 potential clients that he'd really want to work with, saying, I just thought you might be interested in this. We think that the process engineers are a really important part, very undervalued, etc., etc., etc. He got assignments in off the back of that worth £100,000 in revenue. Now, I can't, be responsible for whether he placed all those, but we can absolutely take the credit for the fact that that piece of content got him those jobs in. Really, really simple measurement.
Wow. So really that slide should be the £100,000 article. Is that correct?
Oh, it should be, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a typo on my part, the £100,000 article.
Yeah, well, really powerful. It shows you how you can use content to win business, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So back to your point from earlier, differentiation. So think of how many recruiters knocking on the same doors trying to get that business.
Yeah.
And your recruiter has got a point of difference to get into those conversations. Brilliant. Love it. So next article, one FOI request, 6 new contracts.
Yeah, so this was for a healthcare recruiter, MSI, and it's a while ago now, but there was a big hoo-ha about so-called rip-off agencies charging a lot of money for agency nurses and locum doctors. And so Jeremy Hunt, who was the health secretary at the time, brought in an agency cap, which meant that hospitals couldn't pay over a certain amount of money. However, if there was an urgent need, they could go outside that and use an off-framework supplier. So you had people who were on a PSL framework that were sticking by the rules, and you had off-framework suppliers who were charging, goodness knows what for a if you need an oncology nurse, you need an oncology nurse. So the government then put out a piece of what I call propaganda. They'd call it news, saying we've saved the NHS millions of pounds by putting these agency caps in place. We did a freedom of information request to every health trust in the country to ask them how many off-framework suppliers they were having to use to get the staff they needed, and whether by not using those they were breaching patient safety. And it was something like 79% of them were having to go off framework to try and find the staff they needed. Otherwise, patient safety would be breached. That got absolutely everywhere because we were able to, we had solid data to show the government were basically telling, porkies. But what we also did is we gave all that data to the recruiter. The recruiter then put it into a report, and that was a door opener for them to say to NHS Trust, look, let us come and help you turn around your framework spend. They used it as a BD exercise and won 6 new contracts off the back of it.
Brilliant. You think of the long-term value of that. You think of the lifetime value of customers. I mean, if they keep that customer for 5 years and look after them, each of those 6, that could be worth millions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, here's the next one. Next case study, one Daily Mail article. Major PSL pitch.
Yeah, so this was for a construction recruiter down on the South Coast, and they really wanted to be known for something. They wanted like a big idea. And so we came up with a campaign which we called Girls Aloud, which was all about getting women into the construction sector, not necessarily just, building stuff, but project management. And we found a case study of a female project manager, and we got that into the Daily Mail. Again, the consultants used that to send out a mail out to some of their potential clients. Off the back of that, they got invited to come and speak at a major infrastructure conference about diversity and how to encourage more women into the sector. And at that conference, they got chatting to the procurement team who were resourcing a major power plant project in Wales, and they got onto the PSL pitch for that.
Brilliant. And you know, the thinking back again for some of the work you did when you worked with me, Tracey, the getting us in the Evening Standard, you then get a telephone call from the Times or a telephone call from the BBC because they've seen you in the Standard and their researchers are looking out for experts to add value and get fresh ideas.
Absolutely.
So I think it's quite interesting how you can mushroom the PR by being in major publications, Daily Mail perhaps being a case in point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about leveraging content?
So leveraging content, this is probably my favourite case study. And so we've been working with Alexander Mann for a number of years now. And so this started off as one white paper. So we did a white paper on the future of work, where we interviewed a number of their clients, and it was quite a meaty white paper. It was a really good report. Off the back of that, obviously, we then created a press release. And so this is really going back to my sort of cog in the middle of the wheel thing about how to leverage content and how to get the most out of it. So we did a press release on the main angles of that white paper. Off the back of that press release, we got 4 HR publications that wanted us to write about, different aspects of that white paper. So we got 4 articles commissioned. All that coverage was then turned into website blogs for their own website. And those blogs were pushed out through social media, and the white paper was pushed out through mailing campaigns. And then the result was this. So a 607% increase in web traffic. That content award should go under the cup, actually. But anyway, 607% interest in web traffic, 20 new contract wins, and a corporate content award for AMS, which they were pretty pleased about. So, just from that one white paper, it just shows you if you leverage it properly and use it in the best way you can win real business off the back of it.
Fantastic. And again, reusing the content. I wonder how many people listening may have got a piece of PR somewhere or an article or a blog, but that's it. I think what you're opening everyone's eyes to today, Tracey, is in a number of levels, is how you can reuse that content in a multitude of ways.
Yeah.
We've got a question coming in actually, which is, can you define white paper? So John's saying, can you define what a white paper is?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. So it is a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? So a white paper is really just an ebook. It's a report. So, if you do a salary survey and you write some context and market trends around that could be viewed as a white paper. But it's really just a really lengthy piece of content. So it's longer than an article. You're probably talking, perhaps between 2,000 and 5,000 words.
Okay, so it's an update on the market or a report on market trends or a look into the future and so on, yeah? Absolutely. Another question coming in, if you've heard me a second, and that's just John saying, thank you very much. So I'm sure other questions might be coming in, but the next webinar is going to be Barnaby Winter. So before I say thank you for Tracey for attending, everybody on this webinar for some additional added value, if you have not attended one of my live management training events in London, you're welcome to come along to one of those for free. More details of that on mikewormsley.com. So please look that up and drop us a note, and you're welcome to come along to one totally for free. We normally sell them for £350. Going back to Tracey's company, if you want to look her up, it's BlueSky-PR.com. I think in my circle, my network, there are some high quality people I've got to know over the years, and Tracey, I firmly place you in that camp. I know how much great work you did for me and the team back at Parker Bridge. Definitely helped with the exit. If you remember, we had we had a strategy of the 4 different marketplace. The client marketplace, we want more clients. The candidate marketplace, we want more candidates. The employee marketplace, we want more employees, we want more recruiters. And the 4th marketplace was the investor marketplace. Yeah. And, you know, looking back, I wonder if the sale of Parker Bridge ultimately at a good multiple originated, you know, a lot of it down to your good work and people knowing who we were in a bigger way. And certainly people thought we were a lot bigger than we were. So it definitely had impact. So thank you for coming along today and joining myself and Tracey. Thank you, Tracey, for your insight.
You're welcome.
And looking forward to the next webinar, which is Barnaby Winter Building a Brand. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.